Hi, welcome back to episode 4 of Le Chemin du Roi. My name is Lisa Elvin-Staltari, and I am a genealogist and a passionate traveler. I wanted to do this series to really give you a bird's eye view of what New France and Quebec really is all about. And Le Chemin du Roi will really help you understand Quebec. If you're taking this journey with me virtually, you're going to learn a lot about history and a great deal of how the towns are laid out. If you're planning to do this in reality, please let me know any suggestions or thoughts you have, as this is also my travel itinerary. I will be taking this journey. I'm not sure when, but I will definitely be using it as my guidepost. And I look forward to any suggestions that you might have. Understanding history is really critical because in genealogy, it's all about location, just like in real estate. And so knowing the history of your of the town, knowing how it came to be, knowing the church and what it might have influenced, your ancestor, or just the inhabitants, if that's not your particular place, is really critical. And understanding, the lay of the land, so to speak, it really is important, because otherwise it's like you're traveling without a map. And history will give you the GPS that you need, okay, in order to really make your way. Before we begin, let's have a look at me. And I have obviously a website called Have Roots Will Travel. I have this YouTube channel. I'm on Twitter and on Facebook. I can be reached by just posting a comment on this YouTube, or please feel free to email me at lisa@haverootswilltravel.com, and I'd be glad to get any of your feedback on all of this. Let's get started, shall we? Now, the very first trip that I wanted to do was the trip on Le Chemin du Roi. And I first got to know this road by doing some work. I am doing work on a series called Les Filles du Roi on my channel. And these ladies kept, coming to New France and settling in these areas, and I was fascinated. And slowly I realized they were all kind of connected. And then in my childhood, I remembered Le Chemin du Roi. And I said, And I kind of put it all together. I said, this would make a really interesting travel, A, for me. And B, maybe I should, do a little series on it on my YouTube channel. So this is how it came to be. So let's find out a little bit about Le Chemin du Roi and how it exists today. Now, Chemin du Roi is actually on Route 138. Route 138, however, is part of the Quebec highway system, and it stretches all the way from Blanc-Sablon in the left picture. You will see a red arrow at the top, to Blanc-Sablon. Winding its way down to Quebec, it goes all the way to the bottom red arrow, which is Elgin, Quebec, which sits on the New York-Quebec border. That's a whopping 880 miles, about 1,420 kilometers. We are not doing that road trip today. What we are focusing is on a small portion of Le Chemin du Roi that passes through, certain areas, and we will be examining all of the areas from Quebec City all the way to Repentigny. And so let me give you a little history on the Chemin du Roi. It is one of the oldest highways in Canada. In 1706, Le Conseil Supérieur, the Grand Council of New France, decreed that a road should be built to connect the houses along the St. Lawrence River between Quebec City and Montreal. So in true governmental fashion, work began 25 years later in 1731 under the supervision of Grandvoyer, which is the senior road surveyor, Eustache Lannelier de Boisclair, and was completed in 1737. I think that's pretty good. It took them 6 years. Considering, some of the construction projects I have been witness to, 6 years in 1700s. I applaud them. I definitely applaud. Can you imagine your ancestors in one of the many seigneuries that were along the path of this, looking at these? What are they doing? So upon completion, the Chemin du Roi was 7.4 meters, about 24 feet wide, and over 280 kilometers, or 170 miles long. And it crossed, actually, in the seigneuries, 37 of them. The odds are one of your ancestors, if you have any in Quebec, probably lived along Le Chemin du Roi. At the time, the Chemin du Roi was the oldest highway or road, the longest road, I should say, north of Mexico. By 1910, however, Montreal decided that it didn't want that part, so it changed it, it transferred it, that portion became Gouin Boulevard. But I fully intend to do Gouin Boulevard in reality. I'm just not exploring it today. But I will be on Gouin Boulevard, just as like many people go on Route 66. There are portions that it's no longer Route 66, but it is, you know. So I wanna just kind of begin my journey there. Now, of course, what happens on the Gouin Boulevard is it does not contain any of the markers that we will see on the next slide. The Chemin du Roi is the first roadway built between Quebec City and Montreal that could accommodate wheeled, and we don't mean cars, we mean carriages, and this would, I think, further cement the solidarity of Quebecois as this was a very new, still within 100 years of creation, new country. And they were all kind of, isolated. The road connected them. I kind of consider it as a 1700 version of the internet. It connected these people in ways that they had never thought of before, and it made the distances so much less than it had been before. And I think that went a long way to solidifying the culture and the strength of the French Quebecois, even after the conquest. So I think the Chemin du Roi represents something even greater than just a road. So let's have a look at what it looks like when you're traveling on it. Now, in actuality, the Chemin du Roi, as you can see by the blue line from Quebec City to Repentigny, is only about, or so Google tells me, 2 hours and 20 minutes. That's how long it takes. It's going to take us longer in virtual land. But along the way, when you're doing it in reality, you will see Chemin du Roi, highway signs, and you'll also see in the different municipalities Vieux Chemin, different markers where you can have your picture taken, which I fully intend to do myself, and scrapbook it. And so this is one of the most charming aspects of Le Chemin du Roi, that it really keeps telling you that it is this historic road. Now, with the next stop, we're dealing with two villages that merged in 2002, so it's very, very recent. Deschambault-Grondines, the merged population of these two villages is slightly over 2,000 people. Yes, it's very small, but it's huge in terms of history. Let's explore Grondines first. Now, the name Grondines comes from Samuel de Champlain, seen here on the left, himself, which comes from the word gronde, which means rumble or roar. It first appeared in 1632 as a word to describe this place. And in 1637, both Grondines and Dechambeau were both made into seigneuries at the same time by a Compagnie des Sans Associés. And this is a very prominent, it's basically in the English called the 100 Associates Company. And these are the people that actually were from France and came and began purchasing, buying up, land and distributing it. The ownership of Grondines would be transferred to the nuns of the Hôtel Dieu de Quebec. And you remember we looked at this when we were in Quebec City. We looked at what they did in the Hôtel Dieu and all of that. This occurred in 1646 and was signed by Charles Huat de Montmagny. All of you know there is a Montmagny today, and it's named after him. In 1672, Grondines Seigneurie would be expanded further, and the very first religious confirmation would be celebrated by none other than Monseigneur de Laval himself. Now, in 1680s, the registers of the church were open, and the parish took the name of Saint-Charles-des-Roches. However, the inhabitants of the village, Quebecers are very stubborn people, and they liked calling it Grondines, so they kept with it. And eventually, the parish would change to Saint-Charles-des-Grondines. In 1713, a church was finally built. But year after the year, the church would become impassable due to the spring flooding. Sometimes the church would have to suspend services for 2 weeks because the roads were just impossible to get through. And the priest at the time actually would write to the bishop and would say, I have to do communion by canoe at this point. Please give me a new church. Finally, after much praying, I'm sure, and begging, 1843, a new church is built, and it is the church you see before you, l'Église Saint-Charles-Borromée. And so you can see the interior of it. I've actually included a few pictures, just truly magnificent, as would befit a place, because remember when, as would befit a place that is this historic. Now remember, when you would get churches, and get new churches, unless there was a fire and it destroyed everything, a lot of times some of the inside the churches, so even though the church is relatively new at 1843, the inside of the church, certain altars and things like that would be taken and put into the new one. So when you're going into any Quebec church, know that even though it may have a date of 18 something or less, but certainly it would have, unless fire was present, would have taken inside of it a lot of historic treasures. So that's part of the inside of the churches. The outsides are beautiful, but in the inside will tell the story. The Cemetery of Seychelles is actually named after an Italian priest who was made a saint. And this cemetery opened in 1840. All of the older burials would be moved because, as we've looked at, the cemeteries became flooded. So they needed to move the bodies. So let's talk a little bit about Deschambault. As we have seen, in 1637, Deschambault, along with Grondines, becomes a seigneurie. But by 1640, Eleanor de Grandmaison and her husband, François de Chavigny, came to New France and acquired this property. Now, by 1674, Jacques-Alexis Fleury Deschambault, who was married to Marguerite Chavigny, who was the daughter of Eleanor and Francois, he got a portion of the land. I guess Eleanor said, okay, my son-in-law is pretty good. By 1683, she really likes him, and she gives him the entire seigneurie. And then by 1713, the parish of Saint-Joseph was founded. So we're going to talk about, I want to show you on the left. It's kind of hard to see, but there's an actual plaque in Dechambeau dedicated to Eleanor and Francois and their descendants. It took a while for this area to be settled because until 1670, the threat of the Iroquois posed such a great, menace that they really, inhabitants did not want to go here. But when they did come, they were generally, they began as the Indian War subsided. The people generally came from Ile d'Orléans and the Côte de Beaupré. And by 1762, there were still only about 762 people living in the seigneurie. The names of the first inhabitants are names that to this day are so many French Canadians are related to, because remember, it comes from Ile d'Orléans, which are among the first original, and the Beaupré. And so when you're gonna, and I don't do this for every location, but this one was just too good to pass up. Here's a few names. And so if you're French Canadian or have French Canadian descendants, kind of listen up. You've got Amelay, you've got Masson, you've got Le Duc, Couillard, Toussaint, Maillot, Saint-Amand, Arcan, Nou, Méran, Cloutier, Gauthier, Paquin, Groslo, and Benoit. If you have French Canadian or have French ancestry, it's highly likely that one of these names will be part of your heritage. For me, I've got a couple of people in there too. So it's just remarkable, you know, this little tiny place and how important it was and is. So the history of the church in Deschambault begins in 1686 when a chapel is built on the Deschambault seigneurie. By 1713, the parish is actually created, and finally, a church is built. And you can see the actual older church that we'll be looking at. And then by 1759, the church is damaged by the British during the conquest. Apparently, a British ship fired a cannonball and it hit this church. Just amazing. Thankfully, the damage was repairable, and the church carried on for another 79 years. And finally, a new church was blessed on Christmas Eve of 1838. This is the church you see in this picture, although, of course, it's been remodeled, and modified, and that's just how it works in Quebec. And, of course, you have the cemetery that is right next to it. Le Moulin à Vent, or the windmills of my mind. Grondines is famous for this monument, or this building, because it is actually the oldest lit existing windmill in Quebec. It is very precious to Quebecers. It was built by the miller, Pierre Mercereau, when the seigneurie was still owned and managed by the Augustin nuns of Hôtel-Dieu. It remained in use until 1880, so 1674 to 1880. Wow, think of the history. The land of the Grondines was bought by William Price, a very prominent businessman in Quebec, in 1895. Now, he then sold it to the Quebec government, who used it as a lighthouse until about 1972. It was a great lighthouse because, I mean, it overlooks the St. Lawrence River. Finally, it was classified a historical monument in 1984. It is now open to tours and visits. Guess where I'm going? I'm sure it's just a magnificent piece, and just to stand in the history of that building will be an amazing thing. Now, the houses truly tell a story. As you're driving along Route 138, you're going to see lots of things. There's going to be some old houses. You need to have kind of like a bird's eye view of where these houses are. And so you're passing through Deschambault-Grondines, and these houses are along the way. The first house, Maison Veuve Groslo, was built in 1715. Just think about that. So let that soak in. America was not America. It was just amazing. And it was built for Geneviève Labert, the widow of Pierre Groslo. He remained in the Groslo family throughout the 1700s and then sold to different families in the 1800s. By 1900, it was purchased by a man named Georges Arcan, who was a riverboat pilot on the St. Lawrence River. And so, as I began doing research, I just had to find out what happened to this house. I don't know, something spoke to me about it. His son Horace would be born here, who was the father of the famous director Denis Arcan, who was the winner of a 2003 Oscar for his film Barbarian Invasion. It's amazing. The history of a house can really reach through time. So there's Denis Arcan with a connection to this house all the way back to 1715. Just amazing. And by the way, Denis Arcan was born in Deschambault. I don't know if at the time that they owned this house. I'm presuming they did, but I could be wrong. Now, the next house is Maison Jean Bourdeau, which was built in 1790, and it has survived and is thriving today as a beautiful B&B. I've included the website for you to check out in case you need a room. Then the next house is Maison Suelle. This house tells the story of the British influence after the Quebec conquest of 1759. The lord of the seigneurie, Henry Black, at the time, who was also a member of Parliament, was the first owner. And then it was owned by another lord of Deschambault, Charles Stewart. In 1880, long after the seigneurial system had ceased, the Sewell family purchased it, and the descendants of this family lived here for more than a century. It was designated as a historical house in 1978. Maison de l'Île, pictured here on the far right, is amazing in that it was built in 1759. That is like a pivotal year. It was burned down by the British, but true to form, Antoine de Lille rebuilt, and by 1765, he's back in his house. So there are a couple of places that are truly examples of living history museums. The first one is Le Moulin de la Charretière de Deschambault. It is open for visits, certainly the operating of a mill, and it isn't a windmill. It would be a flour mill that they would have used, and so fascinating, dating from 1802. This one. So you can really see how that other mill, the windmill, it's just like historic. 1674. I mean, we think 1802 is old. Not around here. Now, the Vieux Presbyterian de Dechambeau, this is the old Presbyterian Rectory of the church. It was constructed in 1815, and it's the starting point. It really is a look inside Deschambault's history, especially if you have relatives in this area. Good place to go, and even if you don't. Who wouldn't want to go and walk a little bit in history? So definitely a trip through time. Well, with all this history and bopping around, I'm getting hungry. Well, I stumbled across a couple of places. They're not really, each of them, one of them is a dining area. The rest are kind of, snacking. Let's look at Restaurant Chez Moi. I stumbled literally across this restaurant in my research. I kind of went, what's this place? And I read the story. I went on the website. It's just remarkable. The owner of this restaurant is from France. He is, a true Renaissance man, has done and seen so much in his life, and decided to open up his own restaurant. He's had several very successful restaurants before, but this restaurant, it really means at my house, restaurant at my house. And when you walk in, and you'll see the pictures on the website, which is phenomenal, you'll see that it looks just as if you're walking into someone's living room. Amazing, amazing. So, and not only amazing in terms of the decor, but when I looked at the menu, it spoke of creativity and just amazing connections. And the menu is Mediterranean, I think, with some African and French influences. I got to try this out. Definitely going to check this one out. The next one is Fromagerie de Grondines. Did I mention that Quebec is famous for cheese? There's a reason why we have all those cows. This place has been in existence since 2007, and all of their cheeses are organic. It's truly an amazing place to visit, I am certain, because I've been to fromageries in Quebec, and they're like nothing you've seen. I would tell you, honestly, when you go in one of them, you'll know why we're so proud of our cheeses and why we're so cheese obsessed. The next one is something called Julie Vachon Chocolat. And she's actually an award-winning chocolatier, patissière, I think is what they call it. And she has a small shop here, and obviously, I think sells through her website. I'm definitely going to check this out. There's one thing on her website that I was so intrigued with. It's a famous brownie, and apparently it feeds 8 to 10 people. I should have put a picture of it. Check it out. It's on her website. I'm thinking this must be very small bites or people, because otherwise, my house, yeah, it wouldn't last very long. So it just looks amazing, just absolutely amazing. Gonna absolutely buy some chocolate from Julie. Now, where are we going to next? Well, we are in Sainte-Anne-de-la-Parade. Sainte-Anne-de-la-Parade is a very small town. It has about 2,000 people in it, but its historical significance is incredible. This picture that you see here is actually Route 138 as you're driving through. Just, casually driving through, there's this magnificent church. Just stunning. Let's have a look at Sainte-Anne-de-la-Parade and her history. So let's discover a little bit about Sainte-Anne-de-la-Parade. It's got a complex history, as many of these towns do. It starts off in 1603 with Samuel de Champlain. There's that guy again. He gets around. He discovers the river, Sainte-Anne-de-la-Rivière, but he calls it Sainte-Marie. By 1660s, they change it back to Sainte Anne, so it becomes the Rivière Sainte-Anne. And Jean Talon in 1667 awards the land, the seigneurie of this land, to a man named Michel Gamelin. By 1668, Michel Roy du Châtellerault and his wife, the fille du roi, Françoise Aubé, become the first inhabitants. Now, I'm proud to say that is one of my great-grandfathers. Note to self. 1672, Edmond de Suave and Thomas Thériault de la Naudière become the co-owners of this seigneurie. In 1693, the parish of Sainte Anne is formed. In 1710, Pierre Thomas Thériault de la Perade inherits the seigneurie from his father Thomas. And Edmond de Suave, I believe, just gave it, sold the land to the Thériauts. His wife, Thomas Thériault's wife, this is the interesting part, becomes the seigneuress of Sainte-Anne-de-la-Parade, but she's known for something else. Her name, Madeleine de Verchères, she was a very famous heroine who, when she was about 14 years old, what is it about French women, Joan of Arc, Madeleine de Verchères, she would end up being a person that had, 14 years of age, has defended her family and her village from an Iroquois raid. And so her fame was kind of renowned. She was obviously a very strong-willed woman. And so by 1912, the village of La Parade separates from the parish of Sainte-Anne-de-la-Parade. And so the village and the parish were reunited to form Sainte-Anne-de-la-Parade. Guess what? In 1989. It takes a village. It takes a while. Now, the pictures are of one of the old Presbyterian, the Presbyterian de Sainte-Anne, and also the river. I wanted to just see I just wanted to show like the buildings and how old it is, and also the river. The river is very paramount to Sainte-Anne-de-la-Parade, as you will see in a minute. Now, this church of Sainte-Anne-de-la-Parade was completed in 1869 and was modeled after Notre-Dame Basilica in Montreal. You can see it's incredible. For such a small place, my father would always say, these small towns have these huge churches. It is a thing. So, note to self. And the interior. And then the third picture is the cemetery, which also began in 1869. Part of Sainte Anne was that they were constantly developing, getting a church, and this was about the third church, I believe, that was in the parish. The Seigneurie of Sainte Anne, the Domaine Seigneurial de Sainte Anne, is a living history museum. It looks amazing. And it truly encompasses the history of this seigneurie from 1667 to the present day. I cannot wait to visit this museum, as it features different exhibits and also features information on the Seigneuress Madeleine Verchères and other notables who have lived here. It's open in the summer only, so note to self, you got to go in the summertime. Well, when we stop off in Sainte-Anne-de-la-Parade, not in the summertime, but in the wintertime, it happens to be the world capital of Tommy cod fishing. So I'm told every year from about December 26th to sometime in February, the ice is frozen and they create ice fishing, essentially, and it is the world capital for this kind of fishing. I've seen fishing like this throughout my life on the river. I don't know if it was Tommy cod, but certainly this is a thing. This is a thing. This is not something I've ever done nor plan to, but obviously people love it, and it is a place to go. A lot of people who would not normally go to Saint Anne de Perade from all over the world come here. Fishermen will find fish. These are two accommodations that I thought were so interesting from a historical point of view. The Guide and Café Bistro is housed in a 1917 house. The Café Bistro features a wide variety of food. I looked at it and it was like it had panini press to Mexican. Love it. There are 4 rooms available for lodging. The Auberge de Manoir d'Out, and I'm probably saying it wrong, Doubt. I didn't check with all my French Canadian friends before I did this video. This B&B is housed in a building dating from 1842. And it was originally built by a man named François Doubt and would remain in the family for at least the next century. I really would love to stay here just to get a sense of the history of this inn. It was actually built upon land that was once owned by a Seigneur, Jean Lemoine. And of course, one of the magnificent rooms is named the Seigneur Lemoine room, a gorgeous room, which of course I want to stay in. Now, remember I told you about Quebec and their cheese? It really is a love affair. This cheese factory, L'Ancêtre, has its base in nearby Bécancour, but has a cheese outlet in Saint Anne. I urge you to run when you get to Saint Anne to try this cheese. I've tasted it. It's actually available throughout Quebec and in some parts of Canada. The cheese curds are among many of their products, and they are amazing. I'll be visiting. And I've included the website. And then the next one, you can kind of see the sign, Les Boissons du Roi. It's on Route 138. It's an interesting concept, which is fruit-based wines and non-alcoholic drinks. They started off as a fruit farm, it appears, and moved into this unique beverage. It's definitely going on my list. I want to try raspberry wine. Who doesn't? And with that, we complete our visit to Deschambault-Grondines and Saint Anne de la Perade. I hope you've enjoyed it. I have. I can't wait to see what's up in episode 5. I'll see you then. Until then, au revoir.